Growing up in the 2000s landscape brought the younger crowd back then face to face with the literal unknown. The internet was new, television was its own can of worms, and life felt a bit more unpredictable, in a more innocent way than we're used to now. I wanted to go back in time and down the rabbit hole of some of the more traumatic things that 2000s kids experienced. For some, I'll be showing clips, and if you were around back then, I promise when you see that rolling car, you won't have to scroll down to the comments to hide from a jump scare. Jump scares were legit the worst thing about the internet to a kid growing up in the early 2000s, and it felt like they were everywhere. No, like I said, I won't be jump scaring you here. I remember when YouTube first became a thing, and one of the first videos my dad and I saw was that classic car commercial that I'm sure you all remember. That and the Scary Maze game are the go-to examples of this trend. There are so many that you can't even count them. They typically all follow the same format of getting you to focus on some innocent thing or some piece of the image or video, and all of a sudden something would jump out at you from nowhere. So I'm going to try and stay away from basic things like full-on TV shows and movies. Courage the Cowardly Dog is one you just can't ignore. I don't think there's a single kid from that era that wasn't at least a little creeped out from the series. For many, 2 episodes that come to mind are Freaky Fred, where Miriam's nephew comes to visit and narrates the whole episode with this eerie rhyming scheme that always ties back to him being
quite naughty.
The other is, well, I'll just show you the clip because I'm sure you already know what it is.
Return the slab, or suffer my curse.
If you weren't around for the early 2000s, then you're gonna see that our internet culture had some moments that were just about as brain rot inducing as stuff now. That starts with Rickrolling. There might be a video titled How to Unlock Master Hand in Super Smash Bros. Brawl. You know, the average fake stuff that kids always fall for. However, when you click the video, you might see a misleading beginning for the first few seconds. Then all of a sudden you're jump scared by Rick Astley's song Never Gonna Give You Up, accompanied by the music video. This meme has withstood the test of time, with Rick even joining in for a live action Rickroll at the 2008 Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. While it wasn't scary per se, it was one of the more innocent ways that kids learned not to trust everything they saw online. Blue Waffle is basically a continuation of that learning not to trust everything online theme that we've been talking about. This was a very popular prank for my generation that I saw in real life going as back as far as elementary, I believe. I also insist that you don't look into this one yourself. The Blue Waffle prank consisted of someone or a post simply telling you to look up Blue Waffle. As a kid, you're probably thinking it's some funny looking food until you're greeted with disgusting pictures of what looks to be an infected female genitalia. Of course, like many things from back then, this image wasn't real and the term Blue Waffle was made up. Continuing with the fake pranks back then for shock value, there's Jeff the Killer and Smile Dog. If you don't want to see the images, cause honestly they might still freak some people out, especially if you're watching at night instead of going to sleep, I'll tell you when to look up from the comments again. Anyways, Jeff the Killer and Smile Dog are 2 edited images that basically make creepy faces that were so uncanny and oversaturated that they were primed to get people a bit scared and on edge. Funny enough, the origins of Jeff the Killer and Smile Dog images are lost media. Since their appearances in the early 2000s, they've gone on to headline numerous creepypasta and have basically become mascots for the pseudo-genre. In 2001, Nickelodeon aired the now banned episode of SpongeBob titled Wormy. In this episode, SpongeBob and Patrick babysit Sandy's pet worm, Wormy. At least they think it's a worm until it cocoons and soon hatches into a beautiful butterfly. This is where we get to the banned part. So once it becomes this new creature unknown to SpongeBob and Patrick, it lands on their helmets and the show jump cuts to a close-up of a butterfly's face and plays a loud buzzing noise. The Amber Alert system became a thing in 1996 in order to send out a message to the masses about missing children. While it began in Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas, it quickly became a thing throughout the nation and was a well-known thing throughout the 2000s. In 2002, it became a statewide mandate under the presidency of George Bush. While the system allowed at least 180 children to be saved, it also scarred those who were still in the safety of their homes for life. The alert is accompanied by a siren, followed by an eerie voice recording of someone detailing the emergency. To this day, many of those growing up from that era get a bad feeling in their stomachs at the sound. Of course, that means it works. Along with Amber Alerts, PSAs, or public service announcements were used to spread awareness about things that could endanger children as well as adults. While these short television interruptions began before World War II, they continued and only grew in variety and popularity during the 2000s. Kidnapping, sexual harassment, and the scariest of all to 2000s kids, drug PSAs, ran rampant. I'm sure you all remember the deflated girl weed commercial that either scared you away from drugs or made you want to take them even more. There was always something so creepy about these, and I'm sure once again that was the point. But even when they tried not to be creepy, they were. I don't know if any of you had to watch the fire safety video in school, but that song and that stupid talking alarm lived in my nightmares. Him and Smokey the Bear had me taking showers, scared that I would open the curtains and one of them would jump out at me like Five Nights at Freddy's. Invader Zim is another no-brainer that I had to include. This is one of those series where kids watch until they ran into an episode that finally noped them out. For me and many others, the episode was Dark Harvest. In this episode, Zim steals the organs of kids and replaces them with random items like weights in his hall pass, leaving the kids in immense pain. It's one of the darker episodes in an already dark show and one that scarred a lot of kids. In fact, due to its mentioning in a case, many cite it as one of the reasons the show got cancelled. Majora's Mask is another entry similar to Invader Zim and Courage, where I just had to include it even though it's, such a basic thing. It's just a creepy game in a time where most games felt lighter. Majora's Mask is full of scary visuals, sounds, characters, and more that still live in the imagination of horror fans and scaredy cats that grew up playing it. It's also the birthplace of the creepypasta Ben Drowned. While animatronics date further back than the early 2000s, they were a key feature of the era, due partially in part to the continued popularity of the powerful rat named Charles Entertainment Cheese. Chuck E. Cheese and its animatronics lived in the nightmares of children everywhere, including mine. Why? Look at them, and the countless amounts of horror media they inspired. In fact, as a child, I had many nightmares where I would be sitting in the car ride at the arcade until Chuck himself appeared and chased me throughout the entire building. The red ring and yellow lights of death are two issues that early Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 adopters constantly lived in fear of. Both of these malfunctions are common issues that entailed the consoles overheating or facing some other issue that called for it to be professionally repaired. PlayStation 2's red loading screen is an issue that was more scary than the previous two due to the way it worked. This happens when you insert a damaged or pirated disc into the console. It entails a red startup screen popping up with a lower pitched sound than the usual version. While easily fixed, the vibe it put off was nothing less than unnerving. Even before the 2010s creepypasta, Lavender Town Syndrome, Lavender Town scared Pokemon players simply by existing. Eerie background music and being a Pokemon graveyard will do that to you. Shock sites were one of the most popular gags of the 2000s. You Are an Idiot, Meat Spins, Lemon Party, and more fall under this category. You'd go to one of these sites and be greeted with a variety of things that you'd rather not see, especially at a young age. The media featured ranged from sexual content to straight up viruses. Two Girls One Cup falls in the same variety of shock sites. I won't be detailing this one, and I insist that you don't look it up. It's just a gross sexual video that people were tricked into watching back in the day. Happy Tree Friends is a show in the same vein as the game Conker's Bad Fur Day. It takes furry cartoon characters that would fit right in on a channel like Nickelodeon, but introduces bloody carnage into the mix, catching many by surprise. Missing No is a well-known glitch that happened in Pokemon Red and Blue. It entailed encountering a glitched out Pokemon named Missing No. Upon encounter, it's possible that your game file could be completely erased. Missing No can also be used as an actual Pokemon, and if you fix the graphics with a little trick, it'll appear as one of the ghosts or fossilized skeleton sprites. Sonic CD contained a very creepy Easter egg that appeared by going to the sound test screen and playing the sounds 46, 12, 25. This brought up a screen with a human-faced Sonic the Hedgehog that looked like a hellish caricature of him. It would play the already creepy boss theme of the game and featured the Japanese characters that loosely translated to "Fun is infinite with Sega Enterprises." Apparently the face of this Sonic is actually based on Masato Nishimura, a designer at Sega, who often puts funny inserts of himself into the games he works on. Coco is an Animal Crossing character debuting in the original Animal Crossing. Nothing needs to be said except she's a coconut rabbit that creeped people out because, look at her. But I think she's cute, and since having her join my village, she's become my favorite villager. though I enjoy creepy stuff, so yeah. Hi, I'm Paul is the three-eyed monkey mascot for DNA Productions, the company behind Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius. He would appear after each episode and say, "Hi, I'm Paul." He's actually named after and voiced by one of its employees, Paul Claerhaut. It's not hard to understand why a kid would be afraid of this CG monkey. One hilarious related Reddit story I found on the matter, quotes, "My daughter was terrified of this monkey when she was little. She told us she had nightmares of how to Paul. We had no idea what she was talking about until we saw her reaction at the end of Jimmy Neutron." In a now very well-known gaming mystery, it was found that Daisy's trophy in the game Super Smash Bros. Melee featured a third eye behind her hair. Look away if you're trypophobic. However, it was actually revealed that there were at least 10 hidden throughout her head. Some believe that this was simply due to them making a texture for just her face with 2 eyes. However, the texture was applied to her entire head, including the parts not visible, causing additional eyes. Red Mist is a creepypasta based around the SpongeBob series that is about a Nick staff member that finds a lost tape called Squidward Seppuku, but in English. Nothing happens except a bunch of shock imagery and the iconic face of Squidward before he Sudokus himself. This scene was actually referenced in the now pseudo-banned SpongeBob episode, where Red Mist Squidward was actually revealed to be a real alternate version of Squidward. The face was used as a loud jump scare in the scene and can easily be found online. The Polar Express is a popular film that is an early example of the CG uncanny valley. Many say that the early use of CG face technology creeps them out, especially those creepy elves. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is a children's horror book series that ran from 1981 until 1991. While it ended before the 2000s, the series became known to the children of the era by prominently being featured in school libraries everywhere. The series was covered by horrific images that felt right out of nightmares. I remember staring at one of the decaying face out of morbid curiosity every time I went to check out a new Goosebumps or Frog and Toad book in the elementary school library. Yet I never checked one out. Throughout the years, the book has been challenged and fully banned in multiple school libraries. However, its popularity landed it a recent cinematic adaptation. Final Destination is a series of films that features characters trying to escape visions of impending demise. These passings were no mere attack via masked maniac or invasion. The gimmick of the franchise was the bizarre nature of the K count. Random panes of glass falling, an elevator guillotine, slipping on spaghetti, and more. It led to an entire generation that was scared to drive behind loaded trucks. Animorphs is another series that terrified elementary schoolers. This series that followed various alien battles and transformations always featured a cover of a human child slowly transforming into an animal. This cover is what freaked out and scarred children. Mr. Media is a 2006 sitcom that aired on Nickelodeon until 2009. Nick was no stranger to introducing strange elements to what appeared to be an average teen sitcom. Shows like Cousin Skeeter featured a puppet character along with its human cast of characters and played it straight with many fantastical themes thrown in here and there. Mr. Meaty took it to the next level and was an entire sitcom puppet show, but that's not what made it scary, partially. In actuality, it was the puppet designs and moments in the shows that scared children. For example, there was an episode where one character got a tapeworm, and by the end he passes the tapeworm to a willing taker.
Here we go, come on in.
And we see the worm jump down the dude's throat. It's kind of like 16 meets Ren and Stimpy. I'm not even sure how it got approved, but honestly, this was actually a show I enjoyed as a kid. Scary Flash games were all the rage during the early 2000s. The internet was wild back then, and the Flash games typically reflected that. One of the most infamous of these games was aptly titled The Ugly. In this game, you play as a young girl that's being hunted by an escaped convict named Donald the Ugly Dempsey. The acts, both seen and implied by Donald, are too vile to talk about on YouTube, so if you're old enough, just go look the game up and get ready. Think the Terrifier, but turned up a notch. Yeah, it's actually pretty ugly. Most Extreme is an Animal Planet series that talked about the most extreme animals with extraordinary abilities, revival, hunting skills, etc. The thing that traumatized young viewers was the green CG man that the show featured. After segments, the series would go in depth on what made the animal so special and how its special ability worked. It showed an example of it featured on a human man, the green human man. So not only are you seeing this man slowly transform into a partial beast, but suddenly there's this guy with a dog snout or something on your screen staring at you. I love this show, but man, was this element off-putting. I'd be a liar though if I said it wasn't a part of the charm of the series though. YouTube adult claymations were similar to Flash games back in the day. Back when you didn't get screwed for saying D words or K words, these animations were full-on horror movies, and one of the most famous creators was Lee Hardcastle, the man behind the infamous Simpsons couch gag short, based around the elimination of the Simpsons family. All of his animations go into gory detail. Since his rise in fame, he's gone to work for clients like Square Enix, Adult Swim, Burger King, and more. Arnold being frozen is something that disturbed first graders everywhere. In the episode of The Magic School Bus Gets Lost in Space, to prove a point with his annoying cousin, Arnold removes his helmet on Pluto and is instantly frozen, much to the horror of his classmates and whatever class was watching at the time. Of course, he ends up with just a simple code, but the initial moment was the biggest jump scare the series featured. This one is super personal to me, so I'm gonna talk a bit about it. Marvel Zombies is an Elseworlds tale of the Marvel Universe that began in 2005. The initial series started with Ultimate Reed Richards, who apparently has a knack for changing other universes for the worse. He's tricked by a zombie counterpart of himself into opening a portal into another universe that he and the other zombie heroes invade and infect. From there, we get into this giant heroes versus zombie survival war full of gore, crazy twists, and more. This is a series that ruined Marvel for tons of kids, but out of morbid curiosity and dumb entertainment, we just all had to finish it. I read this entire series at an age too young to be reading it through a series of YouTube videos that uploaded scans of each issue. The series was actually written by Robert Kirkman of the Walking Dead series, which is why the initial runs were actually pretty quality stories. The series has been followed by countless sequels and initially came to a giant conclusion with a guilt-ridden Spider-Man still loathing over his devouring of Aunt May and Mary Jane, effectively recruiting the new zombie Avengers consisting of Zombie Wolverine, Zombie Hulk, a human roadie who is now Iron Man after a drunken Tony's sacrifice, and Sandman, who is the key to the zombies' defeat. They team up and take down the rest of the zombie world, succeed, and finally the zombie time loop is mostly stopped. Of course, comics will be comics, and the zombies world somehow continued, even getting an upcoming MCU animated series. Ren and Stimpy Adult Party Cartoon is a garbage or adultified version of Ren and Stimpy. I'm going off script and I'm just going to tell you this show is full of nudity and it was just stupid and lame and nobody liked it. Let's just get past this one because I don't want to talk about it anymore. LiveLeak is a shock site that was created in 2006. The site's original aim was to host real political war and world event footage in order to bring power to the real press and push citizen journalism. However, the site ended up just being a gorecorn site that people went to see videos with uncensored acts of extreme violence. It first came to prominence with the leak of the execution of Saddam Hussein. Since then, it became the place to follow real updates and videos from American soldiers. In 2021, LiveLeak was shut down, now redirecting visitors to the site itemfix.com, which will ban users from uploading excessively violent videos. In 2008, Axe released an advertisement for its dark temptation called Chocolate Man. It features a guy that sprays himself with a new spray and becomes a nightmarish chocolate guy who goes around charming the world, getting eaten, and getting melted every now and then. It's kind of an all-around cursed commercial. Just look at his face. But fun fact, the costume featured here was actually created by Stan Winston Studios. The studio from Stan Winston, the man behind Pumpkinhead, the effects from The Thing, Iron Man, and a lot more. The Wiggles puppets originally debuted in 1998 but became more permanently used in their own segments throughout the 2000s during the Wiggles. Honestly, there's nothing to say about these guys except they're just abnormally freaky. Like, who thought to put this in a kid's show? Here's the nightmare-inducing decaying Jeff puppet from 2022. LimeWire, and I know some of y'all got shivers just hearing that name. LimeWire is a free-to-use peer-to-peer file-sharing program that was introduced to the net in the year 2000. It got most its fame for being the place that many got their free music from during the early MP3 age. However, the infamy comes from the fact that the site was abundant in viruses due to its peer-to-peer nature. Many of these viruses were unknowingly downloaded due to the lack of knowledge in file extensions and file size early on, and they always ended up in some family computer being destroyed. There's a huge difference in exe and MP3 files, yet many weren't aware of this back then. KB Toys is an old toy store that usually was featured in malls across the United States throughout the 2000s. Upon entering, you'd be greeted by a cluttered, in a good way, store with all kinds of toys, sometimes more niche than the other offerings at Toys R Us. One big difference was some of the toys featured at every KB entrance, which consisted of a plethora of motion activated animatronic toys. This includes the horrific gimme animated Christmas tree. Bro, this thing gives me the shivers. This decoration was featured in stores from 96 to 2001 and came back in 2007 through 2008. During the holidays, it wouldn't be unusual to see kids run past this sentinel to enter in the gates of KB Toys. I'm gonna give another trypophobia warning here. Flapjack was a show full of grotesque imagery, partially why I didn't care for the show, cause that was half the humor. Anyways, there was this scary cat episode that featured a gross cat, and it was a close-up image, and the cat had empty eyes and an empty black mouth, and when they showed him, it played this disturbing sound. Anyway, let's move on. Salad Fingers is a 2004 series about a weird green guy that does weird stuff. That's literally it. He lactates, he impales himself with rusty nails, he sings to corpses, and he does other weird stuff. It's kind of like a cult classic indie version of Invader Zim if Girl was the main character. In 2007, Valve introduced the world to the bald Mr. Valve. This company mascot was featured in the intro for the Orange Box, where we were introduced to him through the back of his head, which featured a protruding valve. This is another self-explanatory creepy entry that freaked out first-time viewers. 1000 Ways to Blank is a Spike TV series that was based around talking about and dramatically showcasing weird ways people have allegedly blanked or are believed to have blanked through urban legends. The show was like Final Destination in that it made young people afraid to just live life because they're afraid to blank randomly. The Sign's birthday scene haunts every child and almost as many adults whenever they watch it. It features a news report that has one of the aliens suddenly appear after a lot of tension and build-up. The Thumb series is another creation of Bob Odenkirk's old entertainment studio. Fun fact, Bob is also an executive producer on Jimmy Neutron. Anyways, Thumbs is a series of parodies that use thumbs as stand-in for characters and parody franchises like Star Wars, Batman, and the Titanic. The series actually aired on Cartoon Network a few times, giving a generation of post-early YouTube kids thumb-filled nightmares. In 2006, PlayStation aired the PlayStation 3 baby commercial featuring a robot baby sitting in an empty room, only accompanied by a PlayStation 3. I have never said PlayStation 3 that many times in one sentence. The commercial is full of eerie noises like echoed cries, and later we see the baby cry while seeing visions of the console's launch titles, aka nothing. Finally, the console floats up while the baby says mama. The ad is another case of game companies going for abstract and landing on creepy. The Sponge Monkeys are these weird semi-realistic rodents that were featured in the Quiznos ad campaign. They sang the famous We Love the Sub song, and I almost started singing it right there. Not surprisingly, these rats were also created by a Flash animation artist named Joel Vitch. Funny enough, the ads barely got Quiznos' name out there because everyone was taken aback from the strangeness of them. Yet another creepy early 2000s commercial came from McDonald's. Yeah, who would expect the fast food restaurant with a clown mascot to have a creepy commercial, right? This commercial featured two men with a connected long nose. The camera would pan from face to face slowly with this disturbing background music. What was this commercial for, you might ask? Fresh coffee. The last commercial featured in this tier is the Dairy Queen Monster Cookie Blizzard commercial. A rather impressive commercial that features a group of monsters creating the Monster Cookie Blizzard in the back of Dairy Queen. The monster designs are actually rather scary, especially the multi-eyed one named Gertrude that has its own little jump scare moment. Daft Punk's first appearance in this list is due to the music video for Technologic. There isn't really much to this one except for the Chucky-like animatronic that's just creepy. The 2003 Hulk game was known for being randomly scary to younger players back in the day. The stealth missions with weird gamma dogs and transformation music are two main culprits, but some couldn't even make it past the mirror scene. Same goes for the actual movie. The Dexter's Laboratory episode, Sore Eyes, begins with an already scary image of a red eye. The plot follows Dexter giving himself laser eye surgery, which results in him seeing hyper-realistic style. So his family just ends up looking like nightmare fuel, making the episode a children's horror film. The Kool-Aid Man series by Danbo is a violent slasher parody of the popular drink mascot. He basically goes around blanking anyone over the age of 5 because Kool-Aid isn't as popular anymore. The Flash game Scooby-Doo Escape from the Coulsonian featured the most out-of-pocket jump scare imaginable for a children's game, and that was not a fake laugh. I laughed because it's so funny that someone decided that children needed to get scared this bad in a Flash game that was for mainstream audiences. Dude, this is freaking funny. I'm sorry. There is nothing to explain here except for how out of place this freaking horrific image is. Like, I'm gonna show it right here. Like, so get ready for a jump scare if you're scared of this thing. Like, look at this thing. Like, dude, this is a Scooby-Doo game, and they even accompanied this thing with a loud scream and a scary message meant to catch the player off guard. Imagine being a kid barely able to read, slowly reading this scary message, only to get jump scared by this mummified face. Like, someone was evil working on this game. Wallace and Gromit: Curse of the Were-Rabbit is a stop-motion love letter to the classic movie monsters, making it very fitting for a trauma iceberg. The scene that gains it a place here is the one that ingrained it in the nightmares of childhood viewers. That scene is the one where Wallace actually transforms into the Were-Rabbit, which isn't scary per se, but for a child I can see it causing a few frights. Not only for how well it's done, but for the character reactions to the whole thing. But as an adult, you probably aren't going to be afraid at all. Anyway, this movie is actually really good. I definitely think it's worth a watch. In the original Sims game, a burglar could attempt to rob other Sims. When he appears, a startling and fear-inducing song begins to play, as well as a loud alarm. He effectively makes the Sims into a horror game until he's caught. Daft Punk's music video for Prime Time of Your Life is pure nightmare fuel. The video is a cautionary tale on the dangers of comparing your self-image to others. The main character is a young girl who sees everyone on the screen of her television as nothing but bones. During the end of the song, she goes to a mirror and rips her face off until she becomes what she saw on the screen. In the end, the parents enter the room and see what was once their daughter blanked on the floor. Nicktoons was a secondary channel for Nickelodeon that can be compared to Boomerang, in that it will regularly air older and less popular and canceled pilots for cartoons. I just said "and" 3 times in one sentence, my bad. Sometimes the channel would show shorts, and well, many of those shorts would probably ruin your night. There was one that I remember but have never found that featured a faceless or headless CGI baby dancing in a dark room. There are others that are just as creepy, but this one took the cake for me. It somehow fit right in on the channel though, as Nicktoons had a more dark and edgy tone when compared to its mainstream counterpart. Daft Punk's Electroma is a film made by the music duo. It features 2 robots in their helmeted image that live in a world full of others like them. So in order to break the mold, they make a mold. No? Okay. But anyway, they want to become different, and they get human face molds made and wear them over their mask. These human faces creep nearly everyone out that watched the film, including me as a child, and that's basically all there is to it. The melting scene makes it even worse. A huge misconception about the 2000s that I've been seeing a lot recently is that the era featured only 1 or 2 big period-defining aesthetics. How many times have you looked up 2000s aesthetic and only found Fruitiger or Y2K oriented fashion pieces? Maybe you got caught up in the wave of pink magazine edits that were inspired by another aesthetic. Well, the truth is that the decade was defined by even more aesthetics, and in this video, I'll be talking about not all of them, but the ones that aren't too convoluted and that were actually relevant to anyone that lived through the 2000s. So let me stop yapping and just get to it. The Frutiger family is where we'll start, since it's one of everyone's favorites of the 2000s aesthetics, and the go-to word when talking about 2000s aesthetics now. This is the defining aesthetic that many associate with the mid-2000s, which encapsulates that 2004 to early 2010s period. It features glossy surfaces, vibrant gradients, soft reflections, smooth curves, and above all, silently delivers the message of futuristic optimism. Whether we've achieved that is up to you, but I'll keep my thoughts to myself. This aesthetic is all about being tech forward and promising a happy digital future. By mixing natural focuses like water droplets, leaves, skies, fish, etc., it associates itself with nature, showing us that digital is simply a new progression for the world. There are tons of versions of the Frutiger style, including the glossy 3D arrow, which is probably the one that you've seen the most. Metro, which is basically a flatter arrow, think Xbox's later aesthetic. Aurora, which takes heavy inspiration from the auroras in the sky like Aurora Borealis. And Eco, which focuses on including nature to deliver the message of sustainability with eco-friendly tech. If you grew up in the 2000s, all of this is probably really familiar to you. Those Windows Vista wallpapers hit for a reason. The same goes for those early iPod commercials. In fact, many tech ads full of random orbs and crap was full of the Frutiger style, especially in the case of PlayStations and Sega. Frutiger is just the perfect encapsulation of that positive energy we all once had about the internet before things got, well, how they are now. But before Frutiger came Y2K futurism. This aesthetic started in the late 90s and lasted until the early 2000s. You know how the entirety of the Men in Black movie looks, Matrix, Xenon, iRobot. Okay, that's Y2K futurism. Shiny, sleek, low-key sexy, and kinda weird. It tried to emphasize the optimistic tech-forward tone, but to many it started to partially represent an obsession and fear of tech. Remember, this was the Y2K bug era, so many had this fear of computers crashing, so that anxiety translated over to adding this hint of alien horror into this aesthetic. This style is what future scenes in Back to the Future 2 were to people in the 80s. We imagined tech that was alien to us, things that were basically realizing that era's digital culture like early net, sci-fi, and computer graphics, which weren't what they are now just yet. Chrome was the way, and that glassy style accompanied it all the time. And you know those 3D renders we all love so much now? Well, those were at the forefront along with the synthetic color palettes that we see all around that period. But Y2K futurism wasn't alone in defining the late 90s to early 2000s aesthetic before Frutiger came along. The Attitude Era of wrestling came along, and that fed off of the Attitude Era of the rebellious people around it. This helped birth the Y2K attitude aesthetic, aka the cultural middle finger style. This bold and bratty style was anything but futuristic. No, if you embraced this style, it was all about owning the present. For an example, look no further than icons of the era like Eminem, MTV, Stone Cold Steve Austin, the inside of an old Hot Topic, and Teen Girl magazines. There is no true core visual style for the attitude aesthetic, but a theme. That theme was looking as extra as possible without caring about what anyone thinks. Suddenly those big shorts make a lot of sense, right? For women, this may translate to hot pinks, chunky shoes, bedazzled phones, while men were wearing white t-shirts or some graphic tee with Eric Cartman or Bart on there, with a pair of big ugly cargo shorts and a backwards hat. This was also the era where a lot of punk media dropped. A big face of this was anime. Yeah, it wasn't always cool or popular. Anime was like this underground club, and therefore it became a rebellious face, even though Toonami was working to make it a bit more mainstream at the time. Rebellious media like Jet Grind Radio, Naruto, Bully, American Pie, South Park, WWF, and the face of the Y2K attitude era, Bart Simpson, truly defined what this scene was going through. Next, let's talk about some of the uglier aesthetics of the 2000s, Mick Bling and Your Bling. Mick Bling, also known as trashy Y2K, is what you think of when imagining those MySpace glitter things, rhinestones on anything, pink Motorola razors, and Paris Hilton. This was about the hot pinks, animal prints, shiny add-ons, those juicy tracksuits, trucker hats, and horrible selfie edits. Remember Paris Hilton's phrase, "That's hot"? That perfectly encapsulates everything that this over-the-top aesthetic pushes. Take one look at the brats and you basically got it. While the women were rocking Mick Bling, men were on Your Bling, which is short for urban bling. This streetwear fashion was heavily rooted in the 2000s hip-hop culture and was a mass appropriation of urban styles. Tattoos, flame decals, city art, paint splats, baggy pants, blinged out jewelry, graffiti, and more ran wild. Oh, and everyone was wearing clothes that were like 3 sizes too large. Think 50 Cent, Def Jam, NBA Street, Need for Speed, Shadow the Hedgehog, the most 2000s game ever made, Boondocks, Linkin Park Gorillas, and more. Oh, and who can forget about those tatted up pictures of Mario, Ghetto SpongeBob, stores like Spencer's, and characters like Hayner in Kingdom Hearts. I mean, look at this man's drip. He's like urban bling given form. 2000s emo wasn't just about a look, but a vibe. Your whole life had to reflect this one to showcase how emotionally rebellious you were. This punk-rooted style mixed in a bit of digital angst to become something new but familiar, and many ran with it without even knowing what emo really meant, other than wearing all black and dark eyeliner. Emo was heavily based in the music you digested, My Chemical Romance, Fall Out Boy, Panic at the Disco, and a lot more of those emotional and dramatic groups were part of the daily rotation. There are many forms of emo as the term changes from generation to generation and holds in it many subgenres like emo pop, emo core, etc. But they all share similar styles and the same roots. You probably had some dyed stripes or tips in your hair, overgrown bangs, skinny jeans, Love Domo and Hello Kitty, Grr, all that type of stuff, and you most likely drew on your shoes if you were into it as well. And I'm sorry, but you also need to be slapped for liking this stupid "I made you a cookie but I eated it" comic that everyone used to post. Scene is a younger relative to the emo aesthetic, and like it, lasted until the 2010s. While a lot of it borrows from emo culture, like the hairstyles and tight pants, it differed a lot as well. Scene fashion was a lot brighter and the music reflected that. Electronic acts like Skrillex or LMFAO thrived here, along with chiptune artists and pop punk creators like Blink-182 or the All American Rejects. This was all heavily inspired by a fusion of the raver, punk, and hippie scenes. I'm sure a lot of you emo kids actually fell into this category instead and had no clue. Following up Scene, another 2000s aesthetic of annoying teens was Hypebeast. This young male-focused subculture comes from a word that originally was made to make fun of people that based their personality around wearing expensive name brand drip. However, when the blog of the same name took that title and reclaimed it, it became a simple classification for this type of person. There's not much to this aesthetic except constantly needing to wear and show off that you own certain brands. Back in the 2000s, the brands that fell under the Hypebeast banner included ones like Supreme, Bape, and Off-White. Nowadays, it's expanded to include things like Cause, Bear Brick, and more, which I own a bit of, so yeah. The Nightcore aesthetic was born right... I'm sorry, I almost laughed at them. This is the funniest one to me. Well, this is one of the funniest ones. The Nightcore aesthetic was born right from the 2000s internet, and it started as a sound from someone thinking that they were remixing music, if remixing meant to speed up an anime, emo, pop, trance, or Eurodance song and up its pitch. However, it eventually evolved into a full-blown visual aesthetic due to its connection with early anime music videos and Hatsune Miku visuals. Nightcore's visuals became anime girls floating in space, many times wearing headphones or with glowing eyes, and these elements were joined by hearts, sparkles, or things like digital rain. Indie sleaze is one of the most corny aesthetics of the 2000s. I just gotta put that out there, I'm sorry guys. It came from the trashy party scene that popped off in the middle of the decade and kept growing due to the influence of early social media like Tumblr and MySpace. Indie sleaze was all about how you appeared on camera, and taking images with a huge flash on was a big part of the hipster 70s electro rock inspired look. One of the biggest keys to the aesthetic was to not match, look a little dirty, and most importantly, look like an underage drinker or smoker. Cyber goth is what happens when goths discover glow sticks, platform boots, and industrial beats and start raving in an abandoned warehouse. Throw in colorful hair locks and neon gas masks and then you got it. This raver style began with an industrial music scene, and due to that meme of those cyber goths dancing under the bridge, it got that much more popular. Rounding out the base level of this iceberg is the skater aesthetic of the 2000s. Popularized by the late 90s extreme scene, but mostly the entire Tony Hawk brand, which includes his library of games. This aesthetic takes a lot of inspiration from punk, but it's mostly about being dirty, raw, and effortlessly cool. The visuals include things like a scratched up skate deck or maybe a blurry fisheye lens photo. However, the core of these motifs go back to the skater brand with graffiti tags, board brand logos, anarchy symbols, Thrasher magazine art, and bad photography. Basically themes you've seen in skater-based music videos and Tony Hawk games. Mall 2K is our first aesthetic that doesn't relate to people or the digital world, but our surroundings in the real one. This aesthetic is built around early 2000s American mall culture. This time capsule of visuals and emotions is full of glossy floors, food courts, and over-the-top consumerism. Mall 2K is made up of visuals like bright lighting reflecting on shiny tile, kiosk full of BS like phone cases, and bootleg hair straighteners, and those toys kids stop and mess with but no one buys. There are also fountains, escalators, and other things seen in old malls. When the minimalism aesthetic took over, this style was finished, as it allowed for easier maintenance due to things like lack of needing to upkeep water, plants, and whatnot. However, it's been somewhat kept alive in the form of a popular vaporwave aesthetic and TikTok edits. Low poly is the GOAT. All of my homies love the low poly aesthetic. This visual style, inspired by the video games of the late 90s, namely featured on the Nintendo 64 and PlayStation 1 consoles, but also the Nintendo DS, is about 3D models with a low amount of polygons. It began as a simple console visual imitation, but evolved into a full-blown style. Though it originated in the mid-90s through 2000s, low poly truly became a sought-after aesthetic in the 2010s. Sub-aesthetics of it include PSX, which is based on PS1 visuals, a motion station based on the PS2 graphics, and the Sega Blue Sky, which is based on Dreamcast visuals. The liminal space aesthetic is one that we didn't notice until long after the 2000s, where it originated from. This equally haunting and comforting aesthetic is less about a look and more about a feeling that emits from a visual. A feeling that gives the vibe of being familiar but empty and slightly off. It captures that dreamlike feeling of nostalgia where you know that place, but you can never really return. Liminal spaces that fall into this category are school hallways during the summer, empty outdoor playgrounds, doctor's office, video game spaces, and other similar visuals. One thing you'll notice is elements used in these always include some kind of late 90s or 2000s architecture and furniture. Now this next one, I'm sorry if it's bringing up repressed cringe for any of you, but nerdcore is a visual and auditory aesthetic that's been around the internet since the late 90s. Originating from the music genre, it's an aesthetic that mixes being hip and somewhat urban with video games, sci-fi, tabletop role-playing games, memes, and computers. It's all about adopting the rapper attitude and being loud and yourself. Just replace the money, swag, and women with nerd stuff. There are tons of faces in this aesthetic. The originator, MC Frontalot, YouTube rappers like YT Cracker, Megaran, Beefy, Joseph on Deck, GF Retro, etc. The latter of these two entertainers falling into the otacore genre, where the focus was on anime, waifus, video games, with a hint of drugs and real women, plus a little bit of hustling in there, which is dubbed the otaku life. The otacore genre is still alive and well, by the way. The visual style of nerdcore is based around early 2000s web design motifs like pixel fonts, sprite art, retro anime edits, flash animations, and do-it-yourself album covers. The clothing side is just a mix of nerd fashion with hip clothing. mixing graphic t-shirts with some actually stylish clothes. Okay, remember Misa from Death Note? Well, she's basically the goth punk aesthetic of the 2000s, an aesthetic that takes inspiration from alienation, death, heartbreak, and anti-authority. Think black leathers, chains, pins, spikes, ripped fishnets, combat boots, and crosses. This Victorian post-apocalyptic grunge crossover originated in Japan and made its way to the West via anime, manga, and video games like Death Note, Killer 7, Final Fantasy, The GOAT, No More Heroes, Shugochara, Nana, and Haruhi Suzumiya, the queen of 2000s anime. Teen punk is basically punk filtered through the lens of a teenager that doesn't really know what punk is, besides being just some visual. This aesthetic, fueled by teen boredom, identity crisis, and brat internet culture, took off due to shops like Hot Topic and popular artists like Avril Lavigne. The draw of teen punk was that you could hop on this style on the cheap. The visuals were based around being DIY, with mainstays being Sharpie drawn on shoes, layered graphic tees, Vans shoes, wristbands, and messy dyed hair. The new rave aesthetic was that LMFAO look before LMFAO was a thing. Based on the UK music scene of the same name, new rave is associated with neon colors, glow sticks, trash, street fashion, and psychedelic influence. Bubblegum dance is one of my favorites of the 2000s aesthetics because I'm a fool for some DDR. This blend of Eurodance, novelty pop, and cartoon aesthetics rose to prominence in the late 90s through the early 2000s, beginning in Europe until it caught on around the globe. Songs like Barbie Girl, Boom Boom, and Bumblebee capture this perfectly. Oh, and don't forget Caramel Dancing. That's part of this too. If you've seen music videos for any of those or played DDR at all, then you're familiar with this. Whimsical visuals and outfits are aplenty here, and you'll be sure to see some kind of 90s or 2000s toy reference somewhere among the bright candy colors. It also collides with the aforementioned Y2K futurism aesthetic via backgrounds and settings. Sticker Bomb was an aesthetic that's simply based around covering whatever circuits with stickers. Yeah, some of these aesthetics get really just weird and super specific. Super flat is one of the harder aesthetics to truly describe through words. Coined by artist Takashi Murakami, this style blends high art, commercialism, anime, and otaku culture into a 2D visual explosion of pop colors with cultural influence and sometimes critique. Many times you may notice that some cute and gritty, disturbing elements coexist here, offering commentary on consumerism and the infantilization of culture. And others just make it to look appealing and cool. Examples of this can be seen within various art pieces of the era, as well as in the super flat pop subgenre, which removes all deeper and more disturbing commentary seen in its originator. Super flat has fallen under scrutiny for many reasons, one being that it fell to its own message, becoming a mass-consumed piece of media known for collabs with big brands and figures. I bet you didn't expect to see your mom's favorite aesthetic here, did you? Live, Laugh, Love is an aesthetic that is based on the suburban, domestic vibe. This visual is less about a look and more about a vibe, value, message, and lifestyle associated with perceived middle-class femininity. The visuals are typically based around rustic farmhouse decor, script fonts, and motivational quotes like "family is everything's" or "bless this mess." Always super safe and always seen in Targets and Home Goods.
Things go well, I might be showing her my O face. Oh. You know what I'm talking about. Oh.
The 1999 mundane office space is an aesthetic based on critiquing the minimalist office environment of the 90s. This look is inspired by the film Office Space and the deadpan energy of the cubicle life. Corporate clip art, Windows 98 and 2000s menus, muted bland colors, office supplies, and standard office attire are the immediate visuals that come to mind. But the mood is very important too. The depression of the pre-2000s 9 to 5 and that "did you get the memo" energy, alienation, and mild existential dread were regularly present. After the 2000s adopted the literal 80s and 90s preppy aesthetic, it started its own version that somewhat subverted the more vanilla look called 2000s preppy. This look is kind of like hype beasts for women, with the main draw to look good and display wealth to onlookers through brands and styles. It was also made to look a lot more sexy. Inspired by Hollister, Abercrombie & Fitch, and wearers like Paris Hilton, 2000s preppy would regularly feature pastel colors, polos, cable knit sweaters, Tiffany jewelry, cardigans, and of course iPods or Motorola razors. Skeuomorphism is a design aesthetic that mimics the look and feeling of real-world objects in the digital world that was everywhere in the 2000s and early 2010s. A style with the core idea of making a digital experience feel familiar by referencing physical objects. This is why the early iPhone era icons look like that. Anime core isn't simply an aesthetic about anime, but a nostalgic vibe that revolves around early 2000s anime experiences. While it didn't truly become an aesthetic to the 2010s and 20s when people started fantasizing about the past, it still technically was the aesthetic of the 2000s. This style is based around things like Toonami nights, Windows Movie Maker AMVs, YouTube anime re-uploads, and low-res anime screenshots. I am a fool for artcore, which is another visual aesthetic that was birthed from a musical genre. The music genre began in 2000 Japan and was a fusion of classic music with drum and bass and EDM with high BPM. This is another style that was somewhat popularized by its inclusion in Ben Money games like Dance Dance Revolution. Artcore aesthetics are usually seen in music videos or album covers. The visuals here pull from European Renaissance, Baroque, and Gothic art eras and mix them with Gothic anime and Lolita motifs to make a fusion of styles to fit the emotional sound of the music. Many times these visuals also include ethereal, angelic, fantastical, and futuristic cues. Other usual visuals include shards of glass, crystals, and ice, otherworldly landscapes, and European languages. Pixelscapes were huge in the 2000s. This visual style, primarily seen in advertisements and online games of the era, were typically isometric pieces using elaborate pixel art. Many times they depicted life in busy urban areas. Webcore is a classic 2000s aesthetic that's rooted in the late 90s websites and forums. This style celebrates raw creativity of the pre-social media internet and typically was proudly ugly. This cluttered visual uses glitter graphics, clashing colors, GIFs, blue links, and more to harken back to an era before web design became more standardized. Okay, now let's talk about another one of my favorites. I love Chromecore. The futuristic look, metallic sheen, and funny tech, it's all just so nostalgic for me. This aesthetic is all about being sleek, shiny, and futuristic with some glowing blue lights thrown in. Many 2000s products fell under this style, including DVD players, game consoles like my love, the Panasonic GameCube, toys, TVs, CDs, and more. Vector Heart and Neo Vector Heart blended vector art, I can't believe I read that in one take, and different color palettes with diagonal lines and futuristic fonts. While Vector was about bright contrast, Neo employed more usage of monochromatic cyberpunk-inspired colors and designs. Metal Heart is a visual style inspired by the 1998 to 2000s Matrix-esque futuristic aesthetic. It's characterized by deformed and abstract shapes, with some unintelligible backgrounds thrown in. Many consider it the edgier cousin of Y2K futurism. It's well known for appearing in tons of media like the mentioned Matrix, Armored Core series, Halo, Ikaruga, and shows like Code Lyoko. The cybervillain aesthetic is a weird one in that it relates to a specific type of character that lasted from the 80s and blew up even more in the 2000s with the birth of more technology and the 3D animation boom. These characters usually fall under the villain class and have some type of cybernetic sci-fi look, as well as command over advanced tech. They each want to create some empire or commit genocide. My GOAT, Megatron from Transformers Beast Wars, fits in here well, but I'm sure you can think of tons too. Bubblegum, sorry y'all, my sister doesn't want me to say that word and she watches my videos. So Bubblegum B is an aesthetic that fuses the childhood of young women with teenage and adult expression. It's heavily inspired by the McBling and somewhat operates as a parody of the aesthetic and being a kid. But the parody is so strong that it wraps around to being a serious aesthetic. Bubblegum B usually takes elements from things like Bratz, Hello Kitty, Anime Girls, and Barbie, and adds in jaded adult themes like sex, cursing, everyday struggles, and more. The visuals combine this with pinks, pastels, and different textures and patterns to create something new. Okay, this one hit my memories hard. Bright Territories is a graphic and interior design style that takes cues from the Frutiger family. It was mostly used by corporations and got its name due to its usage of territory colors like lime greens, oranges, and teals. You probably saw it in a few hotels or cafeterias here and there. Its visuals are made to give the viewer a consumer-friendly human feel due to the colors being inspired by nature. Many times the colors would be joined by rounded edges, natural images like flowers, and pieces that operated as a flat block of color. 80,000 is a somewhat popular trend that surfaced in the 2000s where things of the 80s were made cool again. You can kind of look at it like the vaporwave trend of the era. While going back to the 80s wasn't as cool as it was now or in the 2010s, it was still a thing. However, whereas we have more average people in the mainstream constantly putting a spotlight on the era, in the 2000s the main spotlight came from television shows, music, and fashion, with the nostalgic decade having a bit more of a niche human following. Why do you think retro games and toys used to be so much cheaper? The visuals of this aesthetic are what you'd expect. 80s fonts, 80s consumer products, and those ugly retro plug-and plays that you couldn't get away from. 7HD is a very familiar aesthetic to the 7th generation gamers. This aesthetic is one that many games of that era followed, replacing the bright colors of the early 2000s gen games with sepia brown filters, otherwise known as the piss filter. This was done in order to make for a more quote-unquote realistic or post-apocalyptic look. A long-distance relative of the Frutiger family is Dark Arrow. This aesthetic is very similar to Frutiger Arrow, but brings in a darker vibe, being a lot more inspired by gothic and cyberpunk elements. Dark Arrow is characterized by its use of blacks, deep purples, metallic grays, and glossy finishes to give the feeling of a futuristic, moody edge. It's also closer to the minimalist era, as its designs favor clean, minimalistic looks. This allows it to achieve a more luxury and sophisticated tone, as it was typically paired with high-end fashion like leather jackets, digital watches, and tight-fitting outfits. Remember the old Xbox 360 dashboard? Well, that's Dorific aesthetic. The name comes from the acronym Daylight, Orange, Red, Futurism, and the last letters of graphic. It's largely seen being used in video games and corporate design, and is a mostly minimalist style. Typically, Dorific designs feature a lot of whites that are accented by bright oranges, reds, and grays. Sometimes monochromes are used here to add a bit of interruption and highlight certain things. The video game Mirror's Edge actually shows this off quite well. Electropop 08 is a style that we would have been better without. This aesthetic is known as a recession pop, and its auditory side ruled the airwaves from 2008 to 2013 with musical acts such as Kesha, Lady Gaga, the Black Eyed Peas, Nicki Minaj, Psy, and more rocking it until it died. The visual side included cues like shutter shades, disco balls, neon colors, uneven shapes, and retro future clothing styles that invoked a space-like feeling. Fantasy Y2K is a more forgotten aesthetic of the 2000s that combines medieval fantasy with the vibes of the 2000s. This look was seen a lot in the media of the era, typically in medieval satire like The Knight's Tale, but sometimes played straighter like the setting of Final Fantasy X. Another aesthetic of the era that was posthumously picked up was the female horror game protagonist fashion. This style inspired by characters like Jill Valentine, Heather Mason, if you like this message me, Yuri Kozukata, Ashley Graham, and Sheva Alomar, whose earlier designs even more so fell into this style, If you look at this again, please message. Has soft grunge influences, but was heavily based on Japanese feminine clothing looks. A cute skirt, denim skirt, or tight pants, combat boots or knee-high socks are typically used here. But it's all about looking cute, but practical in case you get chased by a giant zombie. Four Colors is another 2000s aesthetic that started pulling towards the minimalist design style. Based around the usage of a limited color palette of four colors focused on wordless visual communication to create an impactful, yet simple message. Apple's iPod advertisement campaign of 2004 is the biggest example of this. Gen X Soft Club blends nostalgia with the melancholic vibe, and to me is the chef's kiss of 2000s aesthetics. To many, this is one of the more down-to-earth variations of the futurist optimism of the era. Its visuals contain urban typography, such as airports, cities, and train stations, partnered with cool and minimal color schemes. This was mixed with blurs and softening of images to create a minimalist yet tech-forward look. Before it became the mainstream phenomenon for resellers to sell junk they found cheap for exuberant prices, thriftcore was a niche corner of fashion in the 2000s. It's exactly what you think, a style that revolves around items found in thrift shops, flea markets, and garage sales. Therefore, the visuals are that of vintage and retro goods in not only the clothes category, but furniture, electronics, toys, and games. Indie craft is an aesthetic that first arrived in the mid-2000s that blends indie sensibilities with DIY arts and craft aesthetics. There's a heavy emphasis on handcrafted imagery, such as yarn and paper items and characters, a cozy atmosphere, and childlike whimsy, whether it's through stop motion or said items and characters moving on a 3D plane. I'm sure there are a lot of series that comes to mind for this one. Indie craft is truly known for its place in gaming, with examples being Skull Monkeys, The Neverhood, Kirby's Epic Yarn, Ragdoll Kung Fu, which creeped me out as a kid, Hylix, and the king of this aesthetic, Little Big Planet. The late 2000s saw the rise of one of the worst aesthetics in the decade with internet awesome sauce. This style would throw together awesomely epic visuals that would typically include cats, unicorns, rainbows, pizza, lasers, different weapons, space, and more. The style blew up due to meme culture's influence and was seen through viral memes like Neon Cat. While it started off as ironic, many ended up simply just enjoying awesome sauce. We'll just quickly cover the moe aesthetic because it's pretty simple. Basically, it's just an era of making your aesthetic some cutesy anime girl from a 2000s anime, like Konata from Lucky Star. There was also a lot of moeification, which is making things that aren't cute anime girls into cute anime girls. The old meme aesthetic was birthed in the late 2000s and exploded in the 2010s and lives now through ironic meme formats and your mom's Facebook page. This is the aesthetic of all those classic memes that rock the unforgettable impact font. Oshi culture is a Japanese-based aesthetic that is centered around deep devotion and sometimes borderline obsession to one's favorite idol, real life or fictional. It's a lifestyle where people visibly and proudly show their love to the point where it can get creepy. The aesthetic varies from person to person and changes depending on how the person idolizes their idol. Popular ways is simply having a collection of that one person and decorating your social media. However, common idols for Oshis to include are photo cards, glow sticks, light sticks, and shrines. Many may carry a special photo card around in secret due to the depth of their obsession or devotion. It's also very common for these types to be into Sanrio characters and typically take photos with soft or sparkly filters. The general fashion of the aesthetic is very Asian based. This aesthetic also carries duties depending on your fandom, as many Oshis consider it a job to buy albums and merch associated with their idol, as well as attending their concerts, watching their streams, defending them from their haters, and even hosting birthdays for them. This type of aesthetic has always been huge in the East but exploded in the West nowadays with the rise of K-pop and its influence on global cultures. It's also become more of a thing with men due to the boom in VTuber content and anime. I'm sure many women are familiar with the shoe diva aesthetic, even though they might not know what the heck I'm talking about. This look was super common in the commercial sphere with an adult women-focused audience. It's characterized by a fascination on shoes, feminine clothing, urban single female life, high maintenance living, and an obsession with shopping. It's weird to describe, but do you remember all those arts with the Charlie and Lola looking art style that you probably see on coffee cups nowadays? Yeah, that's this aesthetic. Girl literature books, shopping motifs, loopy fonts, poodles, lattes, and more were common for this aesthetic. Surf Crush is an aesthetic inspired by the mid-2000s surfer style that was made popular with various shows of the age. It's a very simple look that was kinda niche due to not really working unless you live near a beach. Despite this, even in the city you might have seen someone walking around with a suntan, Hawaiian shorts, and a seashell necklace. Trailwave is the aesthetic of a wave of underground internet hip-hop that appeared in the 2000s that played a hand in the rise of vaporwave and C-punk. It also ended up playing a big part in developing the sound of modern rap due to rappers like Travis Scott even having a place in this sphere. There are a ton of subgenres that use the trailwave aesthetic, cloud rap, vaporwave, nerdcore, sad trap, and more in that area. Artists include Young Lean, members of Drain Gang like Blade and Echo 2K, Lil B the Bass God, Space Ghost Perp, formerly A$AP Rocky, and Playboy Carti. There's no true set visual for Trailwave, but if you remember those old Sad Boy edits with Arizona T all over them, that's probably one of the best showcases of that motif. Tweencore is that chaotic looking Sugar Rush aesthetic that perfectly captures the MySpace meets Nickelodeon energy of the late 2000s. You know those crazy looks that you see on Disney Channel shows like Hannah Montana and Lizzie McGuire? That's teencore. Or tweencore, my bad. Tweencore takes cues from McBling, Prep, and Old Web while pushing more girly themes, perfectly catching that energy of being a tween girl, mixing innocence with a growing sense of maturity, and a growing sense of not wanting to match. 2K1 is that raunchy look with the big dirty red text you remember seeing in your dad's DVD case. That one movie you knew you weren't supposed to watch. American Pie, American Wedding, Scary Movie, etc. Those films and some more family-friendly ones like Agent Cody Banks employed this aesthetic. It's dirty, filthy, and mixes American trailer park with hip urban hints to create something new. The 2K7 look is 2K1's more mature and dark older cousin. This is a futuristic aesthetic that was seen all over media in the years of 2006 through 2008. It employs the use of cold and dark colors in order to present a somewhat low-key futuristic aesthetic, as seen in many music videos, the PS3 ad campaign, and Spider-Man 3. Shibuya Punk is an aesthetic taken right from the game Jet Grind Radio that is based on inline skating, street gangs, and graffiti based in a near-future urban setting. It has a lot in common with the Y2K futurism aesthetic. While Jet Grind is where it truly originates, other games that have inspired it include Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic Rush, Sonic Riders, a lot of Sonic, the Parappa series, The World Ends With You, Ollie King, and more. The visuals are an infusion of Japanese and Western punk motifs, as I described earlier. This makes cities the main setting for many titles featuring this aesthetic. The style also typically features themes of individualism, freedom of expression, anti-authority, and anti-capitalism. The sound of Shibuya Punk is just as important as the look, with the music of it featuring inspiration from J-pop, hip-hop, funk, techno, punk rock, trance, drum and bass, nu metal, breakcore, and more. Technozen is the aesthetic of the 2000s Japanese technology due to it being able to look cold, professional, cozy, and cute all at the same time. For an excellent example, look no further than the Nintendo Wii, its menus, and its music. Specifically, the music of Technozen has continued to keep living, mostly due to the Wii's influence. This sound includes cues from synthwave, city pop, bossa nova, and Latin music, creating a very relaxing but very tech-forward corporate type sound. I highly recommend listening to some Ken Ishii if you've been looking for more of this. My 2000s public school kids are definitely familiar with Utopian Scholastic. This was the Y2K futurism for rising brains of the era, featuring dinosaurs, animals, the solar system, and knowledge about the human body. Those somewhat surreal looking digital learning tools that we used on PC at school are where you most likely remember this from. However, it's regularly used in Reading Rainbow, Bill Nye the Science Guy, The Eyewitness and DK books, and more. Its visuals are usually very abstract and meant to simulate the amount of amazing things to learn about the Earth. The Victor Flourish aesthetics of Vector Garden and Vector Bloom use vectors mixed with flower patterns in order to create intricate designs that were many times used and children's marketing seen in plenty of girl-oriented media ads. Okay, y'all gonna have to give me a break with this one. Welwitschia, I think I said it right. Welwitschia goth is a gothic aesthetic that revolves around beautiful things but highlights a hidden half of horror within them. Butterflies, blood, and dolls are aplenty here, making this another girl-oriented aesthetic. This aesthetic became closely associated with the creepypastas in 2000s, but it's also seen in media like Madoka Magica, Fatal Frame, Silent Hill 3, and Monster High. Girl Kawa mixes elements of guro or gore and kawaii visuals. It's somewhat a parody of cuteness, using gorish elements to create a cute look, such as eyeball hair bows, or using real hearts in the place of their cartoony cousin. Well-known users of this aesthetic are Gloomy Pear, Kiari Pamu, Happy Tree Friends, and Monster High. The last of our aesthetics that I'll speak on is what is called a poster gal by some and deviant artcore by others. This art style mixes motifs from Western animation and chibi anime to create what became a popular art style with 2000 deviant art girls. It's common for these pieces to have anime eyes, big brats-like feet, simplified fingers, sometimes fangs, sometimes be pixelated, and many times be doing a kawaii type face. The types of media that followers of this aesthetic were into were your typical trance, nu metal, punk cartoons, and Japanese originating stuff. Linkin Park's Alien Ant Farm, your Invader Zims, and especially Kingdom Hearts and Nightmare Before Christmas. Before there was Slender Man, Five Nights at Freddy's, Funny Mouth, and the Russian Sleep Experiment, there were simple screamers. These early short horror pranks all followed similar formats of getting you to trust some quote-unquote innocent game, video, GIF, or GIF if you like to say that, image, or anything of the sort, until you were jumped at sooner or later by some unseen assailant, which I won't be doing to you in this video, so as always, you don't have to chill in the comment sections while you watch. Before we get to 2000s, I wanted to talk about the first ever recorded screamer titled Monkey on Their Backs. This 1970s drug PSA was created by the National Clearinghouse for Drug Abuse to raise awareness for heroin use. The video begins with a wind-up monkey accompanied by a young girl saying, "They say people addicted to heroin have a monkey on their back. Isn't that cute?" Right off the bat, it has everything to be a creepy and engaging ad. Throughout, the monkey is moving around and crashing its cymbals together until it simply stops. Suddenly, the video abruptly switches to a real-life monkey screaming at the viewer. Though the term wasn't coined until the 2000s, this ad is considered the first ever screamer and will be followed by other PSAs and adverts like it. The 90s saw screamers take a more familiar and insidious form, more akin to the intentionally deceitful version we know. This decade would see screamers jump to computers, with the first screamer software, Nightmare, released on Amiga computers. The software would load up an image of a skull, and every 5 minutes, it and a loud scream would take over your computer. Other early net screamers of the 90s include the first screamer game, Fraw.exe, a scareware Trojan that would begin as a game showing an image of the late Nicole Van Croft, stripping, covered by numbered boxes. Once you reveal 10 boxes of the image, a picture of a new old lady would appear, with an audio quote from the Looney Tunes character, Granny, stating, "Aha, you didn't count on Pocahontas, did you, Geronimo?" I'm sorry, this is just so stupid, but you know how screamers are. Others include the infamous screamer featuring shock sites, like albinoblacksheep.com, xrider.com, and goatseed.cx. Now let's get to actual 2000 screamers. Many are unaware that Nickelodeon released one of the earliest screamers of the early 2000s. In 2002, Nickelodeon.com would feature the flash game Black Licorice, a Halloween-themed game that would begin with a warning that told players not to give away any trick-or-treaters black licorice. In the game, 3 kids with real faces on cartoon bodies appear at the door. The player must give each of them orange candy and avoid the black licorice while happy music plays in the background. However, if you were to click the black licorice, the music would stop and the corresponding kid would become a monster, saying, "Black licorice? I don't like black licorice," in a demonic voice. After this, the player automatically slams the door before the monster can attack. While scary, this isn't even the screamer that got the game in hot water. Should the player choose to close the door on the kids without giving them candy, the child dressed as a bee will look into the mail slot and say, "Oh, I almost forgot." They then burst into the mail slot into your home with a now demonic face and shout, "Happy Halloween." The game was removed from Nickelodeon's site due to parental complaints. Hikaru.exe, or the Sadako virus as it's known in Japan, was a Taiwanese screamer program created by Quinn Lin. And I'm sorry if I pronounced any of these names wrong. It's a few foreign names that I'm pretty sure I'm going to butcher throughout this, so please forgive me. Anyway, the program is malware, and if ran, at first it seems to do nothing. But in silence, it begins infecting the computer memory and will randomly show a full screen image of the Japanese urban legend ghost, Teki Teki, with the scream sound effect. Even when the downloader resets the computer, the program will continue to affect it. There is a bit of lost media in the world of internet screamers, and one example is the Super Mario 64 Big Star Secret. This partially lost YouTube video was uploaded to the site in 2007 by LotusMan17 and deleted in 2012. The video was created in Windows Movie Maker and shows the player unlocking Luigi, which has been a big rumor in Mario 64 since the release of the game. The steps are shown on a black screen and the players are told to circle the courtyard statue, kick the boo, and then press the A button on the wall. As the player goes to do so, the Keifi zombie appears from the car commercial scare. A mass media lost hunt began for this video in 2020 but ended shortly. New footage surfaced from it in 2024 from a reaction to the screamer. Speaking of Keifi, not many know that this is where one of the most iconic screamers of all time comes from. Keifi is a German beverage company that released television commercials for their coffee drink made to simulate the jump in energy that their drink would give the consumer. If you haven't figured it out, this is where the scary car commercial originates. A commercial where we see a car driving around some quiet greenery until a zombie jumps out and scares the viewer. There are other Keifi ads such as this that follow the same formula, which feature different average activities including yoga, fishing, and surfing, interrupted by a screamer. The commercials were pulled due to viewer complaints. Obviously, I don't even know how those got approved to be on air. McDonald's.exe is a cousin program to Hikaru, developed by the Yiyu software company that spread alongside it in the early 2000s. It gets its name from the program icon being the McDonald's logo. However, its contents have nothing to do with it or any other fast food, which sucks because it will make it a lot more interesting. When opened, McDonald's.exe will turn the user screen black and show a short horror story, which I'll show here so I don't have to read the whole thing, in green text. Afterwards, everything will disappear, making them think that things are back to normal. After that, a new dialogue window will open which displays the creator, Zhu Haiyi's, contact info. Finally, once the user closes that window, a crazy ghost screamer will appear on the screen. Every 2 minutes this image would pop up until the user terminates the program through Task Manager. Cartoon Network was also put in hot water due to showcasing the screamer. The Courage the Cowardly Dog screamer commercial began with the scene of the titular character's home in the middle of the night. After 17 seconds, a close-up of the giant spider from the first episode pops up, along with a loud noise until it cuts back to the scene of the quiet farmhouse, accompanied by an announcer saying, "Now you know how it feels," in Spanish. Of course, this one didn't air in the US, so a lot of us won't be familiar with it. HappyPuppies.net is an absolutely disgusting shock site that basically operated as Screamer the website. This domain opened in 2007 and is believed to be made to troll users familiar with the website happypuppy.com, a retro video game emulator. Created by Andrzej Naponik, the website would simply open and bombard the user with a slideshow of the nastiest things you can imagine. Most of these things are sexual in nature, but turned up to the next level.
Oh, that's not puppies at all.
The 2005 Resident Evil 4 TV commercial is another infamous television ad. Airing in France, the ad begins with a nude woman breastfeeding her baby, with the narrator stating, "Remember where you are. Feel the most secure, most comfortably, most light. This place will never exist again." Suddenly the woman's face goes black and the zombie's face appears with a high-pitched scream. The ad then cuts to some gameplay and the Capcom logo, until the zombie's face pops up once more. This is yet another example of 2000s gaming commercials doing way too much. This era also saw the introduction to screamer hosters, websites known for simply hosting a myriad of screamers such as Cinema Do Comical, Cartoon Calamities, and TechZone.com. TechZone became famous for hosting 3 separate screamer titles. The first of the trio is Where's Waldo, an animation originally uploaded to Newgrounds by Pimp Master K-Dog without a screamer. This version simply ends once the player finds Waldo in a crowd of people at the circus. However, the screamer version, uploaded later by The Guy You All Hate, yeah, I guess that's an accurate name, features Waldo inviting the characters to find him in the circus crowd while circus music plays. After 30 seconds, Pazuzu from The Exorcist appears and the scream from Mortal Kombat 2 plays. Many versions would follow this screamer throughout the years, including different YouTube variations, one being a Silver Gunner parody titled Carnival Music Where's Waldo. Famously, Jeremy R. Winterrod, the creator of the Scary Maze game, stated that this is what inspired his well-known Screamer game. The second of the TechZone 3 is What's Wrong or What's Wrong with This Image, a Screamer flash animation famous for not only showing up on TechZone, but for also being one of the earliest email chain letter pranks. The animation immediately fools the viewer, seeming to be a stock image of a dining room. It then asks the viewer to find what's wrong with it, though there are 0 errors present. After 30 seconds, it cuts to a black and white face of a woman with a large mouth, hands around her face's sides, and pinkies raised. An image taken from Getty Images that was inspired by the scream. Along with it, Miss May Kilgore's scream from the film From Hell It Came plays. This is one of the most famous screamers there is, blowing up after being re-uploaded to YouTube and showing up on shows like America's Funniest Home Videos, along with other legendary jump scare videos. Its creator, J. Bell McCarthy, stated in an interview that he really just made the video to scare his girlfriend. Bro, I would never trust him again after that. The final of the TechZone team is Say It, or Watch This, as it was known on Funny Junk. The animation begins by playing the song Say It by the Kumbia Kings, while the lyrics scroll up on a black screen. After 12 seconds, a close-up of the Exorcist girl, Reagan McNeil, who you all may as well get reacquainted with, will pop up along with a loud scream. While many of you may think that this was a copy of the Scary Maze game, this was actually the first screamer to use the Exorcist girl, and was technically also the first lyric video on the internet. Speaking of that, the creator of the Scary Maze game, Jeremy Winterrod, will also create a screamer hosting site called winterrod.com that would showcase various, screamers in the form of videos and games. The most famous of these screamers is obviously The Maze, more popularly known as the Scary Maze game. Most of you know how this one goes, but I'll explain it if you've never seen it. Basically, the player moves the mouse cursor through what are believed to be 4 levels of mazes without touching the walls. However, there are only 3 levels, with level 3 finishing with a jump scare featuring the Exorcist girl. The game also begins with a message saying that it's better played with sound despite the gameplay featuring none. This was released in 2004 and was made by Winterrod for Halloween simply to scare a few friends as an email joke. 5 months later, it was sent back to his mother, and after realizing how viral it went, Winterrod decided to make his website to host it and other prank games he made. The Maze would go on to be the premier screamer, blowing up the reaction genre across YouTube after Outlaw713 uploaded the first reaction video to it. Other big games featured on Winterrod such as Hit the Dot and Optical Illusions share the same format, so I won't waste time going over those. However, Swearing Baby by Kevin11 is a bit of a different story. This viral YouTube video that made its way to winterrod.com features a baby asleep. The baby's skin changes gray and his eyes get bigger. He begins to yell, releasing a scream, and the video goes blurry until flashing and going back to normal. Blue.gif or Mystery Room is a screamer from an unknown creator and is similar to What's Wrong in the fact that it's another Find the Error screamer. This one takes place in a messy room, and after 30 seconds, a kuntilanak, which is an Indonesian, Singaporean, and a Malaysian mythological creature, runs towards the viewer and disappears. I won't lie, when watching it for this video, I kinda rushed to close the window when I saw it running towards the screen like it was gonna jump out of my computer. This screamer was originally released and spread throughout the Indonesian net through the WordPress site. You guys are gonna have to bear with me on this one. Indo Crop Circles Oh, it was just endo crop circles. endocropcircles.wordpress.com, where the post was covering the topic of ghosts. The actual Kuntilanak image here comes from a Korean horror book titled Special Horror Experience, from 1993. Halloween Pictures is another Jeremy Rentorot creation that feels like straight up brain rot. It's a screamer disguised as a slideshow gallery of funny pumpkins. And the fact that someone would fall for this really showed you how young the internet was back then. Anyways, the gallery begins with a photo of drunk pumpkins. This is followed by a pumpkin dressed up as a scarecrow showing his butt. That god dang. And then a giant pumpkin. For some reason, this is followed by a bikini picture of someone supposed to be Sarah Palin, but I'm not going to show that. And then a picture of a pumpkin throwing up along with the caption stating, "Now for the funniest pic." Like I said, honestly, if you clicked next and saw the girl from The Exorcist screaming at you, you 100% deserve that. There is no way someone should have fell for this in the year that it dropped, because come on, man. Be for real. While it uses the Exorcist girl scare again, Winterrot's Bubble Wrap Maniac was a diabolical scare tactic, preying on a human lust for the satisfaction of popping bubble wrap. The player is simply tasked with popping virtual wrap, and after 25 seconds, all of our favorite jump scare girl pops up again. There's also an alternate version that replaces her with a creepy girl in a tub with no eyes. Even the gooners of the early 2000s weren't safe for screamers due to the jump scare flash animations like the popular Jessica Alba naked scare. This is exactly what you think it is. It features a cropped image of what's thought to be a nude image of the actress Jessica Alba. This fools the viewer into thinking that the picture is loading up. However, before it finishes loading, a picture of Amy Peterson's horrific face from the film Fright Night appears, along with the sound of a loud roar. Garfield's Scary Scavenger Hunt 2 is a sequel to the original Flash game with the same title minus the 2. This is a point-and-click title featured on the children's website Garfield.com. The player is tasked with helping Garfield get through a haunted maze while finding donuts, muffins, and other snacks. However, when clicking certain objects, they will scare Garfield, which raises the scarometer, which results in a loss when filled. In the gallery of the haunted mansion, if the player clicks on the painting of Garfield sleeping, a message reading, "Study this picture very closely," will appear along with a heads up saying that an important clue is hidden in the image. After around 30 seconds, a cartoon pig demon, along with a loud evil laugh and text saying, "Gotcha," pops up with a heads up saying, "Just kidding." Some of these Flash game developers were actually super evil. Like, these are children's games. Man, you're giving kids trust issues, man. This is crazy. Ghost Caught on Tape or Scary Rocking Chair is another one of what I'd deem the Screamer classics. This 2006 Screamer begins in a green-lit dark room. The room looks like an average family living room with toys on the floor, a couch to the right, and a coffee table. However, what throws it off is the liminal nature of the image and the somewhat out-of-place rocking chair in the middle of it all. During this, a Chevy commercial plays quietly in the background, along with the mom of the family talking about the Little Mermaid. During all this, we notice that the blanket on the couch begins to move a bit. As time passes, near the end, the rocking chair begins to move. After this phenomenon, a woman with the face of the Exorcist girl pops up in front of the rocker and crawls towards the camera as a screen plays. Finally, the video ends with the text szworld.net. Okay, from now on, unless it's like a mega classic or something, I'm gonna skip the Exorcist girl scares, or at least get a break from her. Going through all these is reminding me of when everyone stopped getting surprised by these scares because everyone was using that same image and the same scare tactics. Speaking of screamer fumbles, there were also screamers that completely failed at their jobs due to unforeseen circumstances. This is the case with two classic YouTube screamers titled Loading Page and Safari. They're each, as their titles explain, depicting a loading page and a simple safari trip clip, respectively, until the eventual jump scare. However, the failure comes from the fact that the thumbnail for each of the videos was the actual jump scare creature on YouTube. In 2004, Carlos Ocezi would release Super Mario Bros., not the official game, a Flash game that masquerades as a port of the original NES title. But as you can guess from the title of this video, it's a screamer in disguise. The game starts with the Nintendo logo before going to a menu that allows the player to select Mario and begin. Funny enough, While the game's world is ripped from Super Mario Bros. 1, the Mario sprite is actually from the third game. Anyway, when you begin and start moving right as you usually would in the original game, a Reaper mask appears along with 2 screams. Afterwards, a link to Winter Rods appears. Another popular screamer site that appeared in the 2000s is the Chinese website eddy.com, which held a library of screamers. One of these screamers was Kakia, one of the earliest screamers on the net and one of the most significant. Kakia is an early building block for the horror scene of the internet as we know it today. While urban legends, scary stories, and standard horrific images already ran rampant, a video that set out to give one a false sense of security and calm just to betray them wasn't a thing just yet. The animation is poorly drawn and begins with a stick figure sitting on some grass with the sky in the background. Chinese text that translates to, "How long haven't you?" Taking a closer look at the sky appears. We cut to the stick figure walking down a city street where more text appears that reads, "Walking down the street, you see." Finally, our scare of a white-eyed, open-mouthed thing appears along with a loud scream. This all ends with a simple yellow text saying Kakia. This animation first appeared on Kimo, a Taiwanese blog site. It then became a chainmail trend and blew up from there, even appearing in the West. While not everyone got it, with some even just being confused and thinking they ran into some foreign avant-garde piece, the scare survived the test of time due to being a pioneer of the internet horror genre. Another one of these genre definers is Zokin, which translates to searching, also known as find the 3 differences. It's the same concept as the previously covered What's Wrong, but was the first of its kind and uses a drawn image as its basis. No one knows where it was originally uploaded, but it's exactly what you'd expect going off of the past spot the difference screamers. There's no differences, and after enough time, Amy Peterson from Fright Night appears featuring a roar to scare the player. Another creator that gained a following for creating screamer games was Neil Shapiro, creator of the site Liquid Generation. Liquid Generation hosted animations, flash games, videos, and quizzes that were called sabotage screamers. Users were encouraged to send these to friends and family to scare or embarrass them. They would always end with a scream that said, "You've been sabotaged," along with a ninja. One of these flash games was called ADHD Quick Assessment Test. The game began with a memory test, followed by a short-term memory test, and finally a follow the directions test. During this little Simon Says ending, if the player gets something wrong or after the 3rd success, a picture of a kid in a safety helmet would pop up, shake, and zoom with a scream sound and text saying, "You have ADHD" along with it. I'm sorry, this is messed up, but this is actually this is kind of funny. There were tons of these types of tests in other games and videos alike, including Are You Going to Heaven or Hell, Celebrity IQ Quiz, When Will You Die, the Sex Test, and a lot more featured on Liquid Generation. While the site isn't around anymore, many of these found their way across the net and onto YouTube archives. A screamer shock site that truly shows the difference in old internet culture is lemonparty.org. A shock site that's basically a screamer, but the screamer is just old gay men giving each other favors. This well-known site was the basis of many pranks back in the 2000s and was made to trick people into thinking it was about a Canadian political party called the Lemon Party of Canada. The last group of screamers I want to quickly go over are the series of Michael Jackson ones that went crazy after his death at the end of the 2000s in 2009. The videos, Michael Jackson Scary Pop-Up, 1000 Faces of Michael Jackson, and the most infamous, The Ghost of Michael Jackson. While the first are basically just slideshows interrupted by a screamer, The Ghost of Michael Jackson is the one that destroyed children of 2009. The video starts by saying that Michael's ghost was seen on Larry King Live and that you can hear him in the clip. We then go into a long hallway inside Michael Jackson's Neverland residence. A shadow is seen at the end of the hallway, and a few seconds after, a zombie Michael Jackson from Thriller pops up along with a scream for the Scary Maze game. While the 80s was largely the era that toys became cool and the 90s continued from that, the extreme period of the 2000s felt like a beta test in a lot of ways and in a lot of avenues. And the test subjects were the kids. Companies were always thinking about what they could market to them, what they could get them to obsess over, and sometimes finding out exactly what they couldn't sell to them. Few of those couldn'ts ended up being a bunch of recalled and banned toys that I'm sure many of you from that era remember and wonder, why don't I see these anymore? So let's cut to the chase and see some of the toys not lost to time, but to threat.
What can you dot, then spray for fun that stays?
Aqua Dot!
The magical dots you create, spray, and play. Start with a design and pop, pop, pop your Aqua Dots.
Aqua Dots went by many names: Beetos, Pixos, Aquabeats, and Bendies. I'm not gonna say it. You probably remember them from their infomercial that would run again and again back in the 2000s. They were a part of that designer toy fad that was taking over back then, with similar things such as Bedazzled. A typical product would contain a kit and the mini balls, yeah, laugh it up, that kids could make into different designs. Each small ball came in different colors, and once you finished your design, you would simply spray them with water, which caused them to get sticky and stay together once dry. What caused them to be banned? Well, in 2007, a 2-year-old boy and 10-year-old girl would swallow numerous beads and get super sick. It would be confirmed after the investigation and unconscious after effect of these children, along with 2 more, that the Spin Master produced toys were coated in GHB, a well-known sedative drug used in many cases of data salt that's particularly toxic to children and could cause a coma, as seen in these cases. 4.2 million of the toys were recalled. The toys were re-released in 2009, renamed Pixos, and marketed with a new safety-tested guarantee.
To order, you can call 1-800-524-5103. That's 1-800-524-5103. You must be 18 or older to order.
Moon shoes were the kid-powered anti-gravity shoes, and speaking from experience, these actually kinda sucked. Me and my sister would just make up a game of trying to walk without falling in these because the jumping barely worked. Anyways, these shoes originally appeared in the 1950s, but in an effort to find breakout success in the toy industry, Nickelodeon would reintroduce a new version of them to the world with the more safety guarantees. This really was a new era of trial and error for toys, huh? Moon shoes were marketed as trampolines for your feet and were basically plastic blocks with bungee springs attached to the spot where your foot would be strapped to. The idea is that you would be able to jump around and bounce as if you were trampolining. You can't make this stuff up, guys. There were multiple instances of kids breaking their ankles wearing the shoes around despite the safety guarantee, and thus Moon shoes were discontinued. Sky dancers were much like moon shoes in the fact that they were originally released before the 2000s, but their popularity landed them in a new era. This very simple toy is most likely one you've seen countless knockoffs of. They featured a pull-string base attached to a doll that usually had foam wings. Once you pulled the string, the doll would go flying away from the base and spin around as it falls back down. As the years would go on, more and more injuries concerning sky dancers would be reported, with more than 100 cases of stitches, temporary blindness, and more caused by the flying toys. Thus, sky dancers would be recalled in 2000, and a new safer design would return to shelves in 2005.
Sky dancers really fly. Each sold separately, new from Play Along Toys.
Magnetics are toys that jumped on the construction hype train that toys like Lego were cashing in on for a very long time. Releasing around 2005, magnetics were, as their title led on, a magnet-based building toy. Kids were able to use the various shapes to make different constructs, and yeah. They were one of the most popular toys of the year, and even I got in on the craze back then, despite being more of an action figure kid. They were one of those toys that you would get on Christmas, play for a day, and put away for your better toys. For me, they ended up just being used to build buildings for Godzilla to blow up. Anyways, in 2006, magnetic sets were recalled due to a child losing their life and others needing surgery after swallowing one of the magnets, which blocked the intestines. In 2007, 4 million more magnetic sets were recalled after more intestinal injuries. However, the magnetic sets that were labeled for ages 6 and up were not affected. Back in 2007, the CSI series was incredibly popular, featuring multiple versions airing at the same time. Like always, when a piece of media meant for adults booms, for some reason some executive gets the idea to make it into a children's toy. Enter the CSI Fingerprint Examination Kit. a toy from a show about death and deceit made for your 5-year-old. The toy allowed children to act out their own crime scene. They could mix chemicals, dust for fingerprints, and possibly contract cancer. Yes, the CSI kit was found to contain so much asbestos that it could give children cancer in the future. This asbestos, which was one of the most fatal forms of it, was found within the dust for finding fingerprints. CNET reported that one-time exposure with it was linked with lung disease and mesothelioma years or decades later. The toy was recalled 20 months after release due to an asbestos victim organization making these findings public.
Welcome to Really Baking. Yeah! Now you're really cooking with Easy
Just stir, pour, and pop it into the
Easy Bake Oven.
The Easy Bake Oven is a legendary kids toy originally released in 1963. However, any kid from the 2000s will tell you that it felt like the toy was made for us with how many times we saw commercials for it. The toy originally was released by Kenner, but after Hasbro acquired the company, it would re-release the Easy Bake in the 2000s to wide acclaim. The company wasn't happy with just one kid's oven on the market, so it would go on to release different variations of the toy, including the Queasy Bake Cookinator, or Cookerator, because boys apparently just don't like normal foods. You gotta put some BS on there to appeal to them. In 2006, Hasbro would release a new Easy Bake Oven, featuring a working stove warmer. The company would find that many kids and parents alike couldn't take the heat and thus would get out of the kitchen. This was due to the new design raising safety concerns and causing injuries related to children getting hands and fingers caught in the oven's opening and being burned. 77 children were reported to be burned, and an additional 249 had fingers or hands caught in the oven. 1 million of the ovens were recalled, and Hasbro was sued for $1.2 million, which is $1.8 million when adjusted for today's inflation.
Hey, kids love the Burger King Big Kids meal because it's got more food. And now when you buy one, you can get them something else they'll love. Limited edition 23-karat gold-plated Pokemon trading cards from Pokemon the First Movie.
In 1999, to celebrate and profit for the release of the film Pokemon the First Movie, Burger King would team up with Nintendo and Game Freak to produce Pokemon Happy Meal toys. Or Burger King meal toys, whatever you call Burger King's Happy Meal. The toys would come packaged inside a vacuum-sealed Pokeball themed container. It was found that either half of the ball could be used to create a vacuum, which is especially dangerous when attached to the mouth and nose. I'm sure you know where I'm going with this one. 2 infants of 13 and 18 months were the subject of this case, with one passing away. In 2000, another would be a victim of the kids' meal toy and pass away in the same way. Burger King would recall over 2.5 million Pokeballs due to the suffocation hazard, and most of the containers were either thrown away, returned, or destroyed. The parents of one of the suffocation victims would sue the king and be paid out for a monetary settlement.
Burger King and the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission want you to know about the voluntary recall of this Pokemon Pokeball. The ball may pose a suffocation hazard to children under 3. Throw the ball away or return it to Burger King. The safety of your child is of the utmost importance to us.
Is your scooter tough enough for this? Sharper Image Wheelie Razor is the hottest thing on 2 wheels.
Back in the 2000s, no one would shut up about the original Razor scooter. Metal frame, color choice, light up wheels. It had everything that was cool about the era in one package. It was basically the hoverboard of the generation, and just as many kids would be seen falling off of them, if not more. The Razor scooter would eventually send 110,000 kids to emergency rooms in the year 2001 alone. This was due to reports of the handlebar welds on the contraption breaking and bending, resulting in multiple injuries, including broken arms. They were immediately recalled along with various other electric scooters of the era, including ones from Mattel and MGM. Razor had nearly the same issue in 2024, resulting in another recall, so I guess history repeats itself.
Look out, they're back. The Kerbangers are back, and Smitty's has them. They're the original Kerbangers, and they're guaranteed safe for play and unbreakable, so they'll never chip, peel, or shatter.
Clackers, Kerbangers, or whatever you want to call them, are one of the most obviously dangerous toys out there. While they first gained popularity in the 1960s and